Hey everybody, welcome back to another very exciting episode of the Photoshop Training Hour. With me today is my good friend Aaron Nace. Hey Aaron, how's it going?
Hey, Zeus.
Good to oops and
Awesome to be here, man. How
hey,
you doing?
sorry. The reason that I'm quiet is because I realized I left something playing on my headphones here and I couldn't hear you.
Same here.
But yeah, it's good to have you, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't think a lot of people know this, but we're actually good friends. We love hanging out with each other. We usually see each other once a year in Vegas at WPPI. Unfortunately, it cannot be more than that. But I
Yep.
did promise you that I was gonna head out to your home in Mexico. I don't know if people know that, but you're in Mexico.
Yeah, man. Currently living in Puerto Vallarta on the West Coast, a little beach town in Mexico. It's super cozy. I made the move about a year ago. Actually, my 1 year anniversary is this week of
Ooh,
uh,
congratulations!
thanks, man. Yeah, it's been an absolute it's been a big learning experience. I've lived in the United States for most of my life, and I was in Chicago for like 10 years before then. So moving to a different country, different language, different culture has been just a fantastic learning experience. I feel like, all the rules of life are a little bit different here. So
For
it's
sure.
good to know how to like get into a new culture.
Definitely. So you're streaming from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I'm streaming from California, beautiful San Ramon. Let us know in the chat where you're streaming from. I'm sure we'll get people from all over the world. But yeah, and also let us know in the chat if our voices sound good. I always like to double check to make sure that you can hear us okay. So this is going to be a little bit of a different stream. Originally, we were going to just talk or teach Photoshop, but Aaron and I decided that it might be kind of fun to instead do more of a podcast style where we just discuss different topics of the industry, the creative industry, being a YouTube creator, all that sort of stuff. So we'll see what great conversations we have, and hopefully you guys can find value in those conversations. How does that sound to you, Aaron?
Sounds awesome. Yeah, I think like obviously people are used to us teaching Photoshop,
Mm-hmm.
and we will be doing more of that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's a lot of interesting conversation, about being a YouTube creator, and you and I like have been on YouTube and been independent content creators for at over a decade, and I feel like we've learned so much through that process, and like you know it I don't know about you, but it's definitely changed me. And yeah, I just think that there's a lot of like really interesting conversations around being a creator, being in like the visual industry, like making it out on your own as a artist, and like the lessons that we've kind of learned, and what we did right and maybe what we did wrong as well. So let us know in a comment in the chat, because we would absolutely love to hear your questions and kind of just like open up a dialogue about about life itself, and like how it's tangentially related to making Photoshop tutorials. It's so awesome to see everyone in the chat. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Well, there's a question in the chat that I actually want you to answer because I'm curious. Aaron, did you move Phlearn to Mexico?
I did, yes. Yeah. We still have people working all over the world from home, due to the recent situation. I think a lot of us are working from home these days. But yeah,
Mhm.
I decided to relocate to Mexico. So I'm on the West Coast, I'm in Puerto Vallarta.
Nice.
And then we have people from all over the globe working from their homes as well. So we've kind of made the big shift to just go independent of a specific location. For 10 years, I lived and operated out of Chicago in the United States of America.
Hmm.
Um, and I loved it. Had a fantastic time, but it felt right to make a change, and so we changed a lot of how the company was structured too. To we went from everyone going into work into an office and a full time staff to everyone being remote, and it was an interesting shift. And I think we're all still kind of like learning uh, how to make the most of it. I imagine everyone in the chat is also learning to work and live in new situations. But how about you, Jesus? How's the last couple of years been for you, and how have you felt like an adjustment with your career?
Yeah, so fortunately, I had the great blessing of working from home. So thankfully, the pandemic and all of that really didn't affect that much. As you know, and how we met in person, we used to travel a lot for conferences and things like that. That obviously stopped. But in terms of my creative career and my design career, I kind of have both going on at the same time. It didn't change much, fortunately. So I was in that very fortunate position where the pandemic didn't affect me that much, since I wasn't going into an office every day. How about you?
Yeah, same thing. I think, like being that I kind of already was an independent creator, it really helped out and just kind of like kept going on that route. I did make the transition from being in the office to working from home, which still takes some getting used to, if I'm totally honest. I I like working from home in a lot of ways, but I really miss like my people and being able to like go into a place and have it be uh, have it like a dedicated space and time for working. I feel like a lot of the time I'm always in the middle of like I should be working slash I'm at my house and it's 8 p.m. at night, so maybe I shouldn't be working.
Yeah, yeah.
There's there's always that mix. Yeah.
There's
So
there's a good question in the chat that I really want to ask you, because I'm actually also curious. What school did you go to, and if not Photoshop, what is your favorite app? So the school
uh,
question first.
yeah, good question, Ivan. I went to college in North Carolina at NC State
Oh,
University.
nice.
I studied design, product design actually, which was fantastic. And then shortly after graduating school, I did like a pretty big, I didn't want to get a job vacation slash trip to South America for almost a year.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when I actually fell in love with photography. And when I got back, I realized that that's what I wanted to do for a living. So I started my career as a photographer, and then that kind of like warped into an education career based around photography and Photoshop.
Nice, nice. Yeah. I guess I'll answer the question as well. I went to school at Cal State. It's now called Cal State East Bay. When I was in school, it was called Cal State Hayward. So the name changed since I graduated. And I majored in something called multimedia, which doesn't mean anything anymore these days. But at the time, it was just basically learn all the Adobe applications and Micromedia applications, which eventually became
Whoa.
Adobe, I guess. And I took one Photoshop class during that entire course, or major. Uh, and I got a C, which is not a very good grade if you're in the U.S.
Oh, you shouldn't be sharing that.
So I wasn't very good in terms of grades when it came to school. But stay in school, kids.
Well, also it just goes to show that you don't really need to you can make it on your own, no matter
Hmm.
your past, no matter where you come from, no matter your training up until now, you can always, you know, change your career. You can always take things into your own hands. And, that's something that Jesus and I mean, when you and I met, we were already creating, like we had
Hmm.
already been independent creators for some time, but we both kind of went through that journey of like, okay, graduating from school, messing around with some jobs, deciding to like go on it on our own, and then building that up from um, from nothing. So I think that that's just a really good lesson in that no matter where you're at in life, if you have a goal and you want to do something, you can most definitely do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I just remember reading a question. I'm kind of trying to get back to it, but maybe I'll just paraphrase it here. That kind of relates to, like, how would, if you were starting out today, how would you go about making a living being a creator? Not necessarily a YouTuber, but more of a Photoshopper, whatever that means, whether it's through design, photography, retouching, whatever that may be. If you were 21 years old today and just starting out, or even the same age but just starting out from scratch, how do you think you would go about building a business uh, with the knowledge you have now, obviously?
That's a great question. I think, if especially being in the visual industry, I think I would go YouTube, honestly, would
Mm-hmm.
be probably my number one bet. I feel, and I don't know about you, Jesus, but I feel like YouTube uh, pays its creators the best out of any platform that I've ever
Yes.
used.
Yes.
I feel like it's actually a viable option for earning a living as a YouTube creator. You've got to be, you know, you got to try your best. You got to make a lot of content. You got to try to consistently learn. And, I wouldn't say that it's easy to make a living as a YouTuber, but I think I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And elaborate more on that. No, with the laugh you just said.
Well, I'm sure they're not watching, but one of my good friends growing up, friend from childhood, he, and I think you'll laugh about this. He once came up to me and he said something along the lines of, "Man, you have the easiest job. Like, all you do is you just make a 10-minute video and like you're done and you just get to hang out and have fun." And I'm like, "What?" I don't think a lot of people realize the amount of effort that goes into a 10-minute YouTube video. Planning it, making sure you get it right, making sure that you explain things correctly. I don't know if you do this, Aaron, but I often go back and maybe re-record a segment because then I'll realize that I didn't explain it properly, or maybe the way that I explained it was confusing. So maybe I'll just re-record like a piece to make sure it flows better and people understand what I'm talking about. There's just so much that goes into a video, like even a short 10-minute video, that it could be 2-3 days worth of work. And then I know you have, at least in the past, had a team helping you with videos. I have a video editor as well, so it's collaborating with them. So it's just a lot more than just, flipping on the switch and freestyling for 10 minutes,
Definitely. Yeah, that is very relevant. This week, actually yesterday, I released a tutorial on YouTube on how to remove footprints from sand in Photoshop. It's very specific, but it was actually kind of difficult. And I was making the tutorial. And when I first started making the tutorial, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be too hard. I had done it ahead of time, but I got into actually recording it and I realized how complex the problem was. I wound up recording that tutorial 6 times.
Wow.
Because I just wasn't happy with it. Either the result wasn't good enough, or I felt like I was taking too long to explain how to do it, or making it overly complex. And that wound up being like a 15-minute free tutorial on YouTube. One of many.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. It takes a little bit more than you would think to create good content. I mean, of course, you can just put out any old video, but to release good content does take a lot of energy.
For sure. I saw that you answered it in the chat, but I think it's a good question to ask. Aaron, do you speak Spanish?
Sí, hablo español.
Si quieres, hacemos un podcast en español y solamente hablamos en español.
Ah, sí, perfecto. Vamos, empezamos.
Your Spanish is really good, man.
Not as good as yours. Yeah,
it was my first language. My English is not as good as yours, so there you
go. Your English is much better than my Spanish. I'm learning though, little by little. I've been in Mexico for 1 year now, and I did study Spanish in school, but there's nothing like living in a country where they speak that as their native language.
Definitely. Another good question in the chat by Matt. Aaron, besides Phlearn, do you work with clients in a design basis?
Yes, I definitely do. I work with clients in a pretty large variety of situations, honestly. My background is in design, photography, education, and in video as well. Like, Jesus and I, yes, we produce tutorials mostly on Photoshop, but what we're actually making is videos, right? So like we're kind of like video production houses as well. So I actually work with clients on pretty much all of those different like in terms of photography. I have clients who are photography clients, video clients, retouching clients, post-production clients, web clients. Kind of all over the place. But I would say I don't have clients as like my primary business, if that makes sense. What about you, Jesus?
Yeah, same as you, man. I don't have clients as my primary business. I'm in a very fortunate position where I can be picky with the clients that I work with. Most recently, and I talked about it on my YouTube channel, and I know that you know this. I've been working with the Hollywood industry on creating movie posters for TV and film, which has been really fun for me. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to see my work like on a, if I went to the movie theater or like, like in a bus stop or something like that. And that's actually happened. I've seen my work on a bus stop now. So nobody
So
knows that I
cool.
made it, but like
You
it's,
know.
yeah, well, I know. Yeah. But that was kind of like a bucket list thing. And like, I know this is silly and like, maybe I should be telling my therapist about this, not you guys, but, I remember when I was very young, well, not that young. I was like 17, 18, and I lived at home with my parents, and I was starting to learn Photoshop and design and all of that stuff. And we were just talking about this, that I'm a big Marvel fan. We were talking about it off air, and you are as well. And I used to have on my, so we had a family computer that was in our living room. And I was the only one that really used that computer, so it was technically mine, but it was a family computer. And I had as the screensaver the movie poster for the Spider-Man movie. I'm a big Spider-Man fan. And I remember one of my mom's friends coming over to the house, and I was in my room, but I could overhear the conversation. And this woman looks at the computer and she goes, "Oh, what is that?" And then I remember my mom saying like, "Oh, I don't know. I think my family calls me Freddy, by the way. People, my name is Jesus Alfredo. My family calls me Freddy for my middle name, Alfredo." So she goes, "Oh, I think Freddy made that." Because I was starting to get into art and making designs and stuff. And the lady looks at it and she goes, "No, that's too good. I don't think you could do that." And that like 30 years later, I'm so upset about that. Or 20 years later. So like a part of me always wanted to like do work in the film and TV industry just because just to prove that I could do it. And now that I'm doing it, it makes me feel good, and it feeds that part of me that as much as I love doing YouTube, as much as I love teaching people, that particular part doesn't get filled. I don't know if that makes sense to you. If that makes sense, that the artist part of me doesn't get filled. And I want you to answer this, but I also want to say one last thing. That's why I don't understand sometimes when people are, I don't know. I just feel like making YouTube videos, as much as I love it, as much as I'm gonna keep doing it. I feel like I still need to keep feeding that part of me to stay happy and whole. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we all kind of run into that as creatives. Like we start these things because we love to create and we love the process of making art. And you know, somewhere along the lines, we're like, okay, maybe I can turn this into a way to make a living. And if you're able to do that successfully, fantastic. But there's always that balance of you know starting something for the process of making art and for enjoyment, and then transitioning that into a job. There's always going to be a little bit of a push and pull between wanting that creative fulfillment and having to basically do your job. And I've felt that so many times over the years. And I think that when I'm doing my best in terms of like mental and emotional health is when I'm creating art consistently as well as doing my job consistently. Like I still need both. And for me, my art tends to change quite a bit. It's, sometimes it's more photography based, sometimes it's more like two-dimensional, like graphic design based. I do some 3D work as well in Blender. So my art tends to be all over the place, but as long as I'm making art while at the same time, doing my job, I feel creatively like fulfilled. But as soon as that art goes away, if I'm not making art regularly, I always feel like something's missing.
Definitely. I totally agree with you. Shout outs in the chat to my good friend Andrew Kavanaugh. Do you know Andrew, Aaron? He's a good friend. He runs the Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook.
Oh, nice. Good to meet you, Andrew. We might have met before.
Maybe out
I
of
saw you.
WMAX, he was there.
Yeah, awesome. So good to meet you. Thanks for joining us in the chat. And thanks everyone else for joining us too. So awesome to see you guys. I got a question. I want to jump right into some meat here, Jesus.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to.
All right. And let us know here in the chat as well what you guys think about this. But all right, we're in 2022 here. How do you think Photoshop is relevant today, and how and in what ways and why will it be relevant in, let's say, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And to back this up, obviously, like Lightroom is getting really, really good. People are editing photos on their phone and mobile apps. There are also other pieces of software out there like Affinity Photo. Like, how does Photoshop stay relevant now? What is the reason why a person should still be using Photoshop in 2022?
Yeah, so I think that Photoshop, well, I mean, first of all, is the industry standard imaging application, right? I'm sure that people could make a valid arguments that there's other tools that may be better for specific things, maybe even better overall. I don't know. I haven't tried out all the tools, but I'm sure you can make the argument in certain cases that some tools are better than Photoshop for certain things. Having said that, Photoshop has been the industry standard for 30 plus years. So I think that it's good that if you're starting to be in this creative industry, that you learn the primary tool that your employer may require for you to use. In addition to that, I think that that Photoshop blends really well with the rest of the Creative Cloud suite, whether it's Illustrator. You talked about doing videography earlier, Aaron. I don't know if you had a chance to play around with like importing a Photoshop document into like After Effects or Premiere. It works very seamlessly. So it's a whole ecosystem designed for creatives, and that's why I think Photoshop is still relevant today. There's a lot of things I dislike about how Photoshop works, and we can get into that if you want. But overall, I do think it's the tool. I mean, I made a YouTube channel out of it, right? So like clearly, I like the tool, and clearly I believe in the tool. But at the end of the day, it is just a tool, and there may be better tools at some point. I just think that at this moment, Photoshop is the industry standard, and it is a tool that you should know. But I am not against people using other tools. Like oftentimes I'll make a video on, sharpening or something, and there's always people in the chat, they'll say this software is better at sharpening or that software is better at sharpening, and they may be totally right. Like sure, that piece of software may be better for sharpening, but can that software also do all these other things? Probably not. Now, should you use Photoshop to sharpen if that other product is better? If you don't want to, no, you can go and sharpen your image with that software, get a better result. At the end of the day, what matters is the image that you produce. But in a lot of workflow environments, Photoshop is a tool that's used. Like, for example, I was just telling you that I was working with this design agency. Shout outs to BLT Entertainment, the company that I'm working with on creating these movie posters. They use Photoshop, right? They don't use any other tool. They use Photoshop, and that's what they use, right? So if I wanted to create movie posters and TV posters, I can't go to them and say, hey, I use Affinity Photo or I use some other tool. It's like, no, they want Photoshop files. They want the Photoshop workflow. So that's why I think it's relevant today. I hope that answers your question, Aaron.
That does answer my question, definitely. Let's fast forward. Let's say like 10 years from now, and I want to introduce artificial intelligence as well, because I think about that a fair bit. And, actually just the other day, my wife was showing me an Instagram ad of someone like dragging their finger over an object, and then it removed it automatically. It was like an app.
Yeah.
And and she was like, oh, look, you're out of job. This app is doing your job for you. And I hear that quite a bit, people saying, okay, artificial intelligence is going to get better and better, and things that used to be quite complex are getting relatively easy. So how do you see artificial intelligence entering into the design and editing world, over the next few years? And how do you think that's going to shift how people use these programs and what is relevant?
Yeah, man, I love it, to be honest with you. It really boggles my mind when I hear people say, I know your wife said it as a joke, like this app is
Yeah,
gonna
joke.
yeah, but there's some people who have messaged me and said things like, oh, AI is gonna take over our jobs, or like you're removing all creativity from design, and like I don't believe any of that. The way that I see it is it's just, again, it's just a tool, and at the end of the day, we're creators and we're creatives. These are just tools. So you can use it if you want. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. If I can spend 10 seconds making a selection as opposed to 10 minutes, then I'm going to spend 10 seconds, right? Because at the end of the day,
For sure.
the selection is not really what matters, right? It's what I do with that selection. Um,
100%.
like I actually had a really long email from someone basically telling me that they were, like quote unquote Photoshop traditionalists, whatever that means, and that they were against all the new tools. And I'm like, okay, well, where do you draw this line though, right? Like, are you still using Photoshop, version one before layers, Because layers were one of those things that really changed workflows for everyone. Like you had to use channels to create a drop shadow. You couldn't make a mistake because you had no layers. Next thing you know, you have these things called layers. And what happened to all the people that were very skillful at making art without layers? Like they could have made the argument, oh, you're taking all the skill away from Photoshop by adding layers. You know what I mean? So like, where do we draw this hard line that says before this, that's what it should be? Like I don't believe that. I just believe that it's a tool and it's just going to continue to help us be better creatives. I don't think AI will make you be a better creative or a worse creative. I think it's just another tool, and it's up to you to decide what to do with that tool. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good perspective on it. Yeah, it's coming. There's not anything we can, do without it, but yeah, it's it's going to be a part of it. We have I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, Jesus, and
Yeah.
talk about like YouTube and like, creating content and like making a living and kind of what goes into it. And one of the questions that I have for you is how do you stay relevant over time? Like what were you doing a couple of years ago that still works and you're still doing? And what have you found that you've had to change over time?
It's a very good question, and I'm actually looking forward to hearing your response to that. I'll try to be as concise as possible because I realize that probably not a lot of people watching are YouTubers, but what I think that most people don't realize is that it's not like what was that movie, You Will Build It, They Will Come, Field of Dreams. It's not like a Field of Dreams thing where like I'm just gonna put out a video and then people will come. There's a lot more that goes into that. Is there interest for that video? How are you editing that video? Is the video entertaining? All these different things. To answer your specific question, how have I changed the way I create videos? From say 2-3 years ago. I mean, if you go to my YouTube channel and watch like a 3-year-old video, I'm much more monotone. I'm not as animated. The videos are longer, and the reason that I changed a lot of that is for two reasons. Number one is at the end of the day, what people want is the information, so they don't need a 1.5 minute introduction of me. Saying, hey, everybody, how's it going? I had coffee, and, like shout outs to my coffee shop down the street or like any of that. People just want to learn how to remove a background, for example. So I started making more concise videos. I started doing overlays with keyboard shortcuts because I do say them. But I realize one thing that we both have an international audience where English may not be their first language. So if I say something like, press Control S to save or Command S on the Mac, people would say, oh, well, you're using a Mac. Like, I can't follow you. And I'm like, no, I'm on a PC. I'm on a PC because I didn't use the word Windows or PC. So like,
Right.
so the overlay clearly indicates this is the Windows, logo. This is the Mac logo, and this is the keyboard shortcut for whatever it is that I'm doing. I started doing highlights. I'm doing arrows now. I'm trying to make things more entertaining without losing the teaching of whatever the topic is at hand. So to answer your question, more concise, and just try to make it more entertaining without it hurting the actual content.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's something that, obviously creating YouTube content is relatively specific, but for those of you guys out there in the audience, what do you do with your work if you're creating art? Like, how do you stay relevant? Like, what has worked throughout your career, and what have you changed? What things have you learned and kind of grown from? I would say, like in my experience, the best thing that I've ever done is created as much consistent, good quality content as possible. There's never really been like a super trick that I've found, like any like crazy growth hack or anything like that. it's always just been like consistently trying my best and releasing as much content as I
Hmm.
possibly can.
Sorry, Aaron, I kind of lost you there. What was that? Something happened with my audio.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I was just saying that like one of the big things that I think has helped me is just creating consistent content.
Yes,
The
yes,
best quality content you possibly can make, but make it as consistently as possible.
yes. Yeah, the consistency is definitely key with almost anything you do. You see, I'm a big believer in the 10,000 hour rule made popular by Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers. In my opinion, great book. Check it out if you like to read that kind of stuff. But basically, it just means that you can't really get good at anything or professional level at anything or high level at anything unless you spend about 10,000 hours mastering that, and consistency is a big key to that. And I mean, how long have you been on YouTube? 10 years or so, maybe longer?
Yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So in you've definitely put in the hours and you've been consistent enough to create content that not I'm sure if we go back and watch your first video and watch the last one you posted, it's going to be a night and day and difference. You're going to teach better, you're going to speak better, but it's that consistency that made that happen. And I believe that to be true for any field, not just being YouTubers, also being just a traditional artist, whether it's photographer, whatever it is. And there's actually I saw a question in the chat, and I want to address it because it kind of relates to what we're talking about. And I wanted to give credit to the person, but I already lost it in the chat. But the question was, and you probably saw it, Aaron, was how do you really make money from Photoshop? Like, can we talk? Here's a question. M28Z is asking, can we talk about how to really make money from Photoshop? And I'm assuming the question is without teaching tutorials on YouTube. So I can go first if you want, Aaron, or you
Go
can
for
you
it.
can start with that one. Okay.
Go for it. Yeah.
The answer is I don't know, and the reason I'm saying that answer is because I'm kind of joking, right? I don't know where in the world you are, so I'm going to speak about what it's like from my part of the world, right? There might be differences in where you're at, but I've done that. Like I was a freelance graphic artist for a very long time. Um, I don't know if this still would work, but back in the day, there was a website called Craigslist. I don't know if you ever used it, Aaron, and I would find freelancing jobs on Craigslist. Um, like one of the things that right before I started YouTube, I really wanted to focus on because one like we all do this. I got out of school. I know how to use Photoshop. I'll do whatever. I'll do a
Mm-hmm.
website design. I'll do a logo. I'll do like 30 retouching. I'll do this. I'll do it. Like I was doing everything, and I realized that was a
Yep.
mistake. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if I would have not started my YouTube career, I probably would have focused on one specific thing, and that's what I recommend people to do. Become the the person that people think about, not just when it comes to Photoshop or retouching, but like if somebody needs something specific, like a baby photographer, are they going to think of you? Because if you're a photographer but you do babies, you do weddings, you do events, you do concert, you do it all, then you're not really doing anything, at least in terms of marketing. So
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend people to find like a very specific thing in your area, and that's what you focus on. So like if somebody around town, like you can go to I used to go to the business bureaus meetings and stuff like that. So like maybe you could become like the retoucher for restaurants, and that's your gig, and you can actually make good money taking photos and retouching photos for say restaurants. But that's the thing, like you're the restaurant person, you're not
Yes.
just the photographer that does everything. And you can do that for all kinds of industries. If you're a designer, well, maybe you're the restaurant logo designer, or you're the restaurant menu expert, or whatever. You become the thing in your area, and that's how I would go about making money with Photoshop if I wasn't doing YouTube, and that strategy, at least in the US, would work probably if you're good.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think like any creative art, anytime you're wanting to make a living doing something you love, you're basically running your own business at that point. So, it's completely up to you to get clients and get customers and, deliver them products that they're happy with. So it is, it can definitely be a challenge to go out on your own as an artist, as a creative, or just anyone who wants to kind of start their own start their own business. But I would say, specializing it's a great way to let people know what you're doing often. And so when they think of that thing, hopefully they come to you. I have found, just like as an individual, if I do the same exact thing for too long, I tend to get bored with it. I like, as an artist, I want to create vastly different stuff all the time. I'm over here one day and over there the next day. So the idea of just creating the same thing all the time is a little bit like boring for me. But what I also realize is, like, there is a difference between doing something just for the pure love of creating and then doing something to make a living as a job. So I say, like, balancing your personal creative work with your business work is super important. So you can do your fun stuff on your own, and you can make your, like, content for a living, for a job. You can do that at the same time. But I do think specialization, it just kind of helps people know what to expect from you.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually also, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of what I did with the Photoshop training channel, right? Like, if I really wanted to, I could probably do tutorials like on After Effects or maybe Premiere. I'm not as good in those applications as I am in Photoshop, and that's part of the reason why I chose not to make tutorials on that. But I could definitely do tutorials on that and many other applications. But I wanted to be known as the Photoshop person. Like, if somebody wanted to, hire me for whether it's a speaking engagement or training or whatever, I wanted to be in that list of Photoshop people, right? Rather than like, wait, what does this guy do? Because I saw him do an Illustrator tutorial last week, and now he's doing After Effects, and he's got a tutorial coming out tomorrow on Photoshop. Like, what does he do? So, like, I never wanted that confusion, which is why I literally called my channel Photoshop, training channel, because I wanted to have that specialization in my business, and people knew what it was about. It does have its drawbacks in other ways, but at the end of the day, I think it's been successful in that initial goal, at least.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. We've got a great question coming from Matt Roberts in the chat. It says, after years of making content for YouTube, do either you just work in Photoshop for fun?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'd love to go first.
Go
I
first.
use Photoshop for all kinds of stuff, honestly. It's obviously teaching like specific techniques and things like that is great, but running a business, you have to make graphics and promotional material, and like there's so many times when I use Photoshop when it's a little bit more like using it as a tool rather than trying to do it as a creative outlet. I still do use Photoshop as a creative outlet, but I also use other tools. I like Blender quite a bit. It's a 3D program, and I tend to go kind of like in and out with the different creative programs. So in my opinion, like, learning these creative programs is fantastic. And then, when I have the desire to make something like a photo composite, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll use Photoshop for that. When I want to make something 3D, I'll use Blender for that. So yeah, it really just, it depends on like what I want to create, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree with you, man. I definitely use Photoshop for fun all the time, probably more than I'm willing to admit. Somebody was just asking me recently, like, what do you do for fun? And I wasn't thinking. I just said, oh, I like to do Photoshop stuff. And they're like, no, like, for fun. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I like to do for fun. Because they associate that with my job, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which is true. And in that regard, I feel very lucky that something that I enjoy doing so much is also my job. But I do use Photoshop a lot for fun. And actually, the way that I use it for fun a lot is sometimes I'm just driving and like an idea would pop in my head, and I'm like, I could probably do that in Photoshop, and I will come home and try it, like that kind of stuff. Sometimes I can't use it for fun as much as I would like to, just because I have a lot of like actual work to do. But I'm still having fun while I'm working. It's just not doing it for fun. I probably do it for fun maybe 2-3 times a week. But I'm also on it doing real work, which is still fun for me.
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, and I think that's, that's a balance that we all operate on, no matter, what we're doing for a living. It's always good to have like um something that you enjoy doing, and to do that on the side, whether it's working in Photoshop or other programs. But that's a really good question.
Yeah.
It is really funny when like when your passion becomes your job,
Yep.
finding that balance. I don't know if anyone in the chat has made that transition also, but it's definitely an interesting balance, and it changes over time for sure.
Yeah. So there was a question in the chat earlier, and I think it relates to something I want to ask you. So first of all, people are asking, why do we have that Illuminati background behind us? So what's that about? I don't know if
What do
you.
we have? What do we have behind us? Oh, that image. It does look very Illuminati now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
That's actually a 3D rendering that I did.
Yeah.
That's a photo from, well, it's not a photograph, it's a rendering,
And
but
and that's what I wanted to ask you about. So I know you've been learning Blender. You've
mhm.
done some fantastic work. So I have several questions on that. But the first one I want to ask you is, has your journey into learning Blender affected how you teach Photoshop? In other
Def-
words, you're finding yourself now as a beginner in a very complicated application that you might feel that your journey now is very similar to people watching you, and has that affected how you teach, or not at all? Maybe not.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, when you get really familiar with a program, like you and I are both pretty familiar with Photoshop, it's easy to forget what is like easy and hard to do. When you just become fluent in something, it all just seems the same. To me, like making a curves adjustment layer versus like using channels to cut someone out of their background, like um if you're familiar with it, then it just kind of it it becomes a little bit more difficult to teach it sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because you kind of forget like how hard it is to grasp for the first time.
Right.
Um, so learning new computer programs, one, just helps me to stay humble, to be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I really don't know this at all. But also kind of like helps me revisit how I learned Photoshop in the beginning, and kind of reminds me like what is easy, what is difficult. And then also just like seeing how other programs operate,
Mm-hmm.
and like some things that work maybe better or worse than computer programs you're with, and then like the interplay between them. So I actually still use Photoshop quite a bit for my like 3D modeling and rendering and things like that. So it's like the combination of Photoshop, compositing, and 3D and photography is kind of now what I'm working on with my art. And so to be able to use little bits of each of the programs and tools for different parts of like a single piece, that's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm nowhere near at your level yet, Aaron, when it comes to Blender, but I do enjoy, and I've been watching a lot of tutorials on YouTube, and I've bought some courses myself.
Nice.
And it's funny because I'm watching the videos and I'm learning from the videos, but at the same time I'm like, oh my god, that was such a good way of explaining this. Like like I should incorporate something like that into my videos. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Watching how other people teach. I mean, teaching in general is such a uh it's an art form unto itself, It's really interesting, and it's something that always requires it's something you can always work at. You can always get better at explaining something. I feel like the better you understand something in your own mind, the easier it is to teach it. So anytime I struggle with explaining something, I realize I don't really understand it myself.
Exactly. Exactly. Feel 100% the same. By the way, my phone was oh, but look at this. I have a Photoshop sticker on my phone. My
Yes.
my phone was ringing, and I don't know if you guys could see, but that was Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe. So big shout outs to Colin. He doesn't know that we're streaming. Why is he calling me? Oh, I guess he doesn't know he's streaming. That's why he's calling me. So yeah, Colin's a friend of ours, and that's another thing. I don't think a lot of people realize that. For the most part, I think if not everybody, like we're all friends. Like I think you and Colin were friends before I was friends with you, but as soon as we met, we became instant friends, and Lisa Carney, Christina Shirk, a lot of the people that you see on YouTube, they're like our good friends, and we like text and hang out whenever we can.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, I think it's one of the nicest things about our community and about all the people who watch the videos too. Like everyone is so nice and like supportive. It's really,
Mhm.
really, it's a cool community. I'm very happy to be part of it.
Definitely. There's a question that somebody asked earlier and a related question now, and I guess it's a good topic to continue to when it comes to creativity, and that is hardware. Um, are you a Mac or a PC person?
I use a Mac. I have used PCs in the past, but my daily computer is a Mac.
Awesome. I've always been a PC person. I'm not those people that like hate on the Mac. I actually have a MacBook Pro and I have an iPad, but I don't really use them. My preference has always been PC. And I mean, this stream and all my streams are sponsored by MSI computers. So clearly I'm a I'm a PC person, but I've always been a PC user, which is why I think they approached me that, they were not trying to convert me. So I don't know how you feel about this, Aaron, and I don't know if you have experience on working on both operating systems, but at least in my opinion, I feel that Adobe applications in general, for the most part at least, are cross-platform. You can't really say that one application works much better on a PC than a Mac. You can make an argument that you have an older PC and it works better on a new Mac. Sure, that may be
Hmm.
true, but in terms of operating system itself, I think they do a pretty good job in creating software that works about the same in both operating systems.
Yeah, I think so. I think it really depends on what you're used to. You know, if you're used to Mac, fantastic. If you're used to PC, that's okay. I spent a summer 2 years ago when I was doing some 3D work actually,
Mm-hmm.
and I was switching back and forth between a Mac and a PC like every single day,
Yeah.
and that did not work for me at
Mm-hmm.
all. It only because I would get to like use the keyboard shortcuts on the PC and I'm super comfortable with, then I would jump on the Mac and I'd have to like retrain my fingers again and go back and forth. And I was losing a lot of productivity by switching operating systems
Mm-hmm.
consistently. But I think had I just stayed PC, I would have fallen in love and just used that, no problem. Or Mac. I think just finding the system that makes sense for you and that you feel comfortable with. At the end of the day, a lot of these they're like tools. So like the fastest you can actually work in something usually is the best. And I think a lot of that has to do with muscle memory and familiarity with your tools.
Definitely. And I guess a follow-up question from Photo911. Is there a drawing tablet that is better than a Wacom? I love my Wacom, but is that growing as well? I can't really. Sorry, the thing is so far away with my vision. I'm getting old, guys. um,
We all
anyway,
are.
so basically, like Wacom tablets. I love my Wacom tablet. I actually have one right in front of me. Here it is. Wacom Intuos Pro Medium is what I prefer. I actually have one of the. I don't even know what they're called. It's down
Me too.
here that you can actually, the ones with the screen on it. What are they called? I forget. Wacom, whatever they're called. That you
Cintiq, I think.
Cintiq. Thank you. So I have a Cintiq. It was a, like I did a presentation and like Wacom gave me one, and as much as I thought I was gonna love it, I'm glad I didn't pay $1,000 for it, because I only used it one time. I like my little, whatever it is, $200-300, Wacom medium Intuos Pro, whatever it is. I think it's great. I know that there are other brands. I haven't used them personally. I can't tell you if they're better or worse, but I would imagine much like a PC or Mac debate, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever, as long as you can produce the work, it doesn't really matter if it's a Wacom or not.
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, you're better off using a pressure sensitive like than a mouse or a trackpad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll still do like simple stuff like with my trackpad.
Mm-hmm.
And actually a lot of the time when I'm working in Photoshop, I just use my trackpad on my laptop. But when I want to get into like some serious work, if I'm going to be spending like a couple of hours working and I need to like really have a lot of control or I'm doing retouching or compositing or something a little bit more special, that's when I'll use my tablet, and it really helps out for that sort of stuff. But if you're just like resizing some documents, simple object removal, things like that, um, sometimes I'll just use my trackpad. And um, I've transitioned. I used to be very much a desktop computer, like I would always have my big monitors and everything like that. And these days I work pretty much 100% on a laptop. It's just a little bit of a change of a lifestyle for me, but I actually really enjoy going other places and working from coffee shops or friends' houses and things like that. I try to move as much as I possibly can when I'm working. It just keeps things a little more interesting for me.
Definitely. Like I'm thinking about asking the chat something. So as you guys know, I do this stream once a week, the Photoshop training hour, although we haven't really opened up Photoshop today. And we teach Photoshop, or I teach Photoshop, and I've had other guests like Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe who was just calling me, and he did a session on, I think it was Photoshop tips and tricks. The point is that Aaron called me about a week ago, and had this idea in mind about having a show where we could just talk about the industry, talk about things that you guys might be interested in, not necessarily doing Photoshop tutorials, but more of a conversation. And I'm curious to know, are you guys enjoying this format? Because maybe we can do another one, and maybe it's something that Aaron and I could do. I don't know. I don't want to commit to like once every, like
Every day.
Yeah, every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific. Aaron, coffee with Aaron and Jesus. No, but seriously, I'm just curious to see if you guys find value in our opinions and what we're saying, and maybe this is something that we'll do more often. I don't know if you'd be up for that, Aaron.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always enjoy it, and I think bringing in some Photoshop as well is a great a great way we can kind of like bump up the conversation as well.
For sure, for sure. Since we haven't talked too much about Photoshop, let's talk a little bit about Photoshop, Aaron. Something I wanted to, I always ask people because I'm always curious, is when did you start Photoshop? What was your first version of Photoshop?
Let's see. I think it was 6. Photoshop 6 was when I first started.
You beat me by one version. I started on 7.
Maybe it was 7. It was either 6 or 7. Yeah, I think that, I don't know, there was like a looking glass when you open it up, like a person with like a looking glass.
Yeah, that was well. There was 2 versions with that logo. That it was actually 6 and 7, I think. So,
okay.
So 7 was the one that had more blue in it, I believe.
Okay. We'll just say we started at the same time because that makes it fun.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. And yeah, actually, I don't think a lot of people know this, but we're about the same age. I don't know if we want to date ourselves here, but I think you and I are about the same age.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll say this. I graduated high school in 2000.
In 2000, I graduated in 2002.
Oh God, never mind. We should.
But we might still be the same age.
Yeah.
But hey, look at that. Photo 911 also started at Photoshop 7.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a good version of Photoshop. That was the version of Photoshop that I probably spent the most time on. Because I was still using Photoshop 7 when like CS2 was out, Yeah. And then obviously when the Creative Cloud came out, then I update immediately. And you know what? That would be a good conversation, Aaron. How do you feel about the Creative Cloud and the subscription? Like, I know a lot of people have their issues. There's a lot of, I feel like I get a comment about the subscription model at least once a week, if not more, on my YouTube channel. And the Creative Cloud has been around for 10 years now, more or less.
I think the Creative Cloud is awesome, actually. I think that, Photoshop used to be pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. And most people that I knew who were using it were either using like a student version, they were using it at the university, some people even pirated it. I think opening it up to Creative Cloud meant that a lot more people could afford to use it, and a lot more people could stay more up to date with the current versions of it. So I think it was a great move in general. And I have a subscription for all of the Creative Cloud apps. Yeah. I don't use a lot of them, but every now and then when I like had to use InDesign for, something 2 weeks ago, and I had never really used it. And someone sent me like an InDesign template, and I had to open it up and learn how to use it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad I have it. I got
Hmm.
to download it, learn how to use it for a couple things, and now I feel good about it. So it's nice to have the subscription, especially if you are a working professional. Being able to go through all the different programs makes a lot of sense.
Definitely, and I think you use the right term there, like a working professional. Like I understand that if you're a hobbyist, you may not want to spend either the $10 a month for Photoshop or the 50 for the Creative Cloud. That makes total sense to me. But what doesn't make sense to me is someone who's a working professional. Like not having the best tools for their job. Um, the way that I see, I mean, again, I don't know how things are done in different places, but at least in the U.S., that's a business expense. You can write that off, and um, any other business would have higher fees for services and products that you need that would be more than even the $50 a month, price. So in that regard, to me at least, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I can totally understand if you're just a hobbyist and you're not making any money from it, doing it for fun, staying with CS6 for as long as possible. Why not? Sure.
I agree with that completely. Yeah. If you've got the tool and it does the job you need and you paid for it, like great. It's like the difference between like buying a car and keeping it for a long, long time versus leasing a car and trading it out every couple of years for another lease forever and ever. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you've paid for it and it does the job you need, then awesome. Um, I think that, most of the features that were available in Photoshop CS6, that's still most of what I use these days. I would say like the big things that I would miss. If I had to go back to CS6 like right now, I would really miss select subject.
Yeah.
And I would really miss the spot healing brush tool with content aware.
Good one. Good one. What would I miss the most? Selected mask workspace I like better than Refine Edge
Me too.
workspace.
Me too.
I'm trying to think here. I'm trying to think of what has been. There's like a lot of little things that like you may not even think about that would be a big difference. I mean, a couple keyboard shortcuts, like for example, CS6, when you drag the layer into a group, the layer will go to the bottom of the group. In newer versions, it goes to the top. If you want to go to the bottom, you have to hold shift. So like little things like that,
Yeah.
like would really get me. But besides that, you're right. I think I could do with CS6 just fine if we exclude anything with the Creative Cloud, because I do use the Creative Cloud libraries often. Like on almost every project, I will use a feature of the Creative Cloud libraries.
Oh, that's interesting. That's something I never use.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Hey, you know what we should do, Jesus?
Let's do it.
We
What is it?
and what do you guys think about this in the chat? We should have a session where we each show each other, like you show me how to use Creative Cloud libraries because I don't know how to use them and I never do,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe I can show you something that you don't use, and
Perfect. Perfect.
so we can kind of educate each other that way.
Maybe we can do that on your channel on Phlearn, and we'll do episode 2 on Phlearn. And by the way, if you don't know, if you've made it this far and you don't know who this gentleman is, that is Aaron Nace, and he has a YouTube channel called Phlearn. If you haven't subscribed, please go to it, subscribe, come back, and continue watching the stream. But do you know how many videos you have, Aaron? Like I would imagine 500-600 or so YouTube tutorials now,
Something
Photoshop
like that.
tutorials. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, so there's a plethora of Photoshop tutorials and content for free, and you have your subscription. I don't know how to describe it, but you do have pro tutorials for people to watch if I want to go more in depth.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. It's awesome to be here with you and with Jesus. And yeah, it's just a fun, like, we were on the phone the other day,
Hmm.
hanging out, and it's like, let's just do this on YouTube.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize that I do this with you, with Colin Smith, Matt Klefkowski, who you guys may know, where we just call each other and we start talking about this, and it was a wonderful idea. Aaron suggested, hey, why don't we do this live and just talk about Photoshop, the industry, and whatever questions people may have, and if you guys like it, we might keep doing it. I don't know.
There we go. Um, Well, let's see. I'm trying to think if I have any more questions for you.
Well, tell you what, in the chat right
Yes.
now, leave us, ask us a question that we can answer in a couple, like a minute or two. It can't be like a full-on course on how to design something in Photoshop. But if you have a question that you guys want to ask, we'll pick one or two out of the chat if it comes in the next 30 seconds or so, and then we'll be happy to answer that question, and we'll leave with that. So make it a good one, guys.
That's awesome.
How about this? You have a question for me before give people time to talk, and I have one for you. So.
Um, I want to know how you got your career started on YouTube.
Oh
Like,
man, yeah. So I was a web developer for approximately. So I started out. My first job out of college was a designer for Motorola. I used to work for Motorola, and I eventually left that job to start a t-shirt company with a couple of friends. We were designing t-shirts and stuff like that, and that went to hell. And I was looking for a job on Craigslist, and I found this gig for this marketing company where I could essentially be their computer slash graphics guy. But having worked at Motorola, I learned how to code. So I learned HTML, CSS, PHP, and all this other stuff. So I was doing that kind of work primarily for this marketing company, but I was also doing a lot of graphics. But my main job was, like 70%, developing, and like 30 or less percent like actual design and graphics, that which is what I really enjoy. So I kind of decided to just start making stuff for fun in Photoshop. And then one day I was like, because people knew that I was good at Photoshop, and I actually made like a video tutorial for a friend when he was going to apply for a job. And I was like, all right, so like you watch this, learn this, and you'll be fine in your interview. So that was like my first tutorial ever, actually. And then I thought, oh, well, why don't I make tutorials on things that I thought people would enjoy? But, and this relates to the question that you asked me earlier, those tutorials were very different than the ones I'm making today. Those videos were like 45 minutes to an hour. They were long, long projects, because I was just trying to make like this really cool whatever, like, I don't know, I made like an egg with like an alien inside of it or something, like so I was doing those graphics, and thankfully people enjoyed them. But then I realized that if I wanted to reach a larger audience, I would have to kind of like scale back and do more basics rather than do more advanced stuff. So that's more or less how I started. But I wasn't going all out like I am now. I probably made like maybe 10 videos in a year, so not many.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's so interesting to learn that you've changed your content throughout time, like learning what actually works on YouTube and other platforms, and kind of changing and adjusting. Do you want to pick a comment from the chat so we can close out on that?
Yeah, let's do it. We can do a quick fire because there's a couple of ones here that are interesting. So I'll ask and you answer since you're the guest. What kind of music do you listen while working?
I listen to Jose Gonzalez. He's a guitarist he's Swedish, but I think his heritage is Argentinian. He's fantastic.
I have no idea who that is. I have to look him up. Jose, you said Jose Gonzalez?
Jose Gonzalez, yeah,
awesome.
He's a beautiful musician.
Awesome. I listen to I'm from the Bay Area. I listen to hip hop and rap, and I'm a big Eminem fan.
Nice.
Where do you look for inspiration and ideas?
Oh, everywhere. Like a lot of just my daily life. Like if I'm having fun and enjoying my life and being out and being creative and having a lot of interesting experiences, I tend to pull all that into my work. If I'm kind of in a more like stay at home time in my life, and like more like internal, then it's usually my work is a lot more like expression of like my emotion. So it kind of depends on the phase that I'm in. How about you?
I I get a lot of random ideas, but that's not really inspiration. So we talked about it earlier. I'm a big comic book fan. I'm a big movie fan. So I would say that probably film and storytelling. I get a lot of inspiration from storytelling, whether it's film, whether it's books, whether it's whatever. Storytelling. So a good story would generate ideas. This is not as quick fire as I thought, but I do want to get to some of this.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a good one, actually. Oh my God, it scrolled up and I couldn't. Okay, is there an adjustment layer that doesn't exist that you would like?
Um, yeah, I would like to see an adjustment layer that is kind of like a combination of like, I would like to see something that is more like color balance, like what we have in Lightroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like a color balance, like a color toning, like we have in Lightroom. I'd like to see that in Photoshop. I think that'd be cool.
Awesome. For me, it would be like a camera raw adjustment layer. I think that'd be
That's what's
super cool. Um, and I guess this will be the. There's two more questions I'll get to, and then we'll go.
nice.
I wanted to ask. Um, so this is not really the question, but I'll ask it a little differently. How do you feel about NFTs, Aaron?
Oh yeah, I think it's awesome. I'm working on an NFT series currently. I've got a lot to learn. It's obviously a brand new art form slash technology and economy, and I think along with that, there's going to be a lot of changes in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very exciting. I think it's a in terms of making money as an artist, I think it's one of the best things that the art community has ever seen in that regard.
Awesome. And the last question for you, Aaron. Um, Motrix is asking question for you, I guess for you both. I find that I tend to use my old methods instead of using newer, better ones to do the same thing. How do you switch to using newer methods?
For me, usually it's just someone coming up to me and being like, "Hey, there's a better way to do that."
So shaming you in public. Got
Shaming me in
it.
public, yeah. And then I always have like 2 seconds where I'm like, "Whatever, I'm doing it my way," and then I'm like, "No, I should learn the new, better way." And every single time, I'm like, "You are totally right. This is way
Yeah.
better. I'm gonna do this from now on. I don't know why I didn't do this a long time ago."
Yep. Definitely. And I'll answer this one. Jesus, how have you been feeling since your medical scare? Thank you so much for asking the question, Matt. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but in October I had a stroke, almost died. I was told I would be disabled, and it was a big old mess. Thankfully, I'm feeling basically 100%. I will probably never be 100%, but I'm like 98, 99, so that's close enough, I guess. And yeah, I'm feeling great. Just taking a pill a day and living normal life now. I'm playing sports again, which is great. That was one of the things I really wanted to be able to do, playing sports. So it's weird because I saw you, Aaron, and then that happened, and I saw you again. So like you didn't really like see me like in between. You only saw me normal, and then saw me normal again, but never saw the me in a walker or a cane or not being able to walk part.
Yeah, exactly. Just because of like, the current world situation and, the fact that I live in another country now meant that we didn't get to see each other as often as we normally do. But I'm so glad you're doing well, and it's awesome you're here, man. We can't keep going without you. So we need you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We went 10 minutes over, but we wanted to get to you as many questions as possible. We might just do this again. I don't know. We'll see. Keep an eye out on my YouTube channel, Aaron's YouTube channel. Go subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out his work. Aaron has fantastic, fantastic videos. And I'll leave it up to Aaron to say goodbye.
Thanks so much, Jesus. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been fantastic getting to chat with you and interact. So thanks again. And yeah, sure.
Learn you later.
We'll learn you later.